What if Earth has been reset? Thousands of times it sounds like science fiction, yet the idea is simple. What if human history is not a single unbroken line, but one of many attempts, each rising, collapsing and vanishing, only to begin again? If the Earth itself resets, then our civilizations, no matter how strong they appear, are fragile chapters in a much older book. This is where our story begins with fragile civilizations, not at their moment of triumph, but in the silence that follows their collapse. Picture the jungles of Central America from above a vast sea of green. Beneath the canopy lie the temples of the Maya, once alive with firelight and voices now buried by roots and vines. In the Indus Valley, the midday sun bakes ancient bricks along deserted streets. And in Rome, arches still stand above an empty arena echoing with ghosts of crowds that once filled it. Each of these civilizations was once called eternal, yet all of them fell. Archaeology confirms it. The Maya world unravelled in the 9th century. The Indus Valley culture declined around 1900 years before Christ. The Western Roman Empire collapsed in the 5th century of our era. Their coins, their roads, their walls remain. But the people, the order, the knowledge behind them are gone. If collapse can occur on a regional scale, could it not also happen globally across deep time? If great cultures can vanish in centuries, what might be lost over tens of thousands of years? Historians point to local causes: drought and war for the Maya, shifting rivers for the Indus, taxation and disease for Rome. Each collapse had its reasons, and yet even with explanations, one truth remains. Complexity does not equal permanence. Strength is not immunity. Now stretch the timeline of our species. Anatomically, modern humans have existed for at least 200,000 years. Civilization as we know it, with writing, cities and law, occupies only the last 6,000. Imagine a 200-foot line drawn across the ground. At the very end, the last 3 feet represent recorded history. Every empire, every book, every king. The other 197 feet are silence. Genetics and archaeology confirm our species' deep age. Writing systems appear in only the final 3% of our existence. So what happened in the missing 97%? Is it truly empty, or were there chapters that time has erased? Civilizations born and destroyed, leaving no lasting trace. Mainstream science warns against filling silence with speculation. No clear evidence exists of complex societies older than 6,000 years. Yet geology reminds us how little survives the passage of deep time. Wood rots, metal rusts, stone crumbles. Over 10,000 years, even monuments dissolve. Silence may not mean nothing happened. It may mean nothing survived. So what do we mean by reset? Imagine not a button pressed in an instant, but a slow, grinding rewrite of the Earth. Glaciers advance like moving walls of ice. Volcanic ash turns skies dark. Seas rise silently, swallowing coasts. An asteroid flashes across the heavens, rewriting the biosphere in a single blow. Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Civilization is a blink at the end of that story. If Earth's history were a 100-minute film, all of civilization appears in the last minute. If we are only the last minute, what of the 99 before? Could there have been other civilizations erased from the reel? No intact city older than 20,000 years has been found. No text older than 6,000. Science cannot confirm what is not evidenced. But imagination and fragments we will examine make the question worth asking. Back to the Maya. They mapped the stars, built pyramids and crafted calendars more accurate than those in Europe at the time. Yet a few decades of drought unravelled their society. The Indus Valley engineered cities on grids, drained sewage with stone pipes, and traded across continents. But when rivers shifted, the great towns fell silent. Rome ruled an empire with laws, roads, and aqueducts that survive in form even today. But corruption, plague, and invasion tore it apart. Its marble forums became quarries for farmhouses. Civilizations rise. They also vanish sometimes, almost without trace. Yes, every fall has rational explanations, yet the lesson remains. Permanence is an illusion. This is the meaning of fragile civilizations. Not that they were weak, but that the ground beneath them shifted faster than they could adapt. A reset does not need to destroy everything. It only needs to change the rules of survival. As we move forward, we will explore these rules of ice, fire, flood, and myth. We will mark what is certain, what is possible, and what is challenged. And we will ask if even the eternal Maya, Indus, and Rome could vanish. What does that say about us standing now at the very edge of the timeline, convinced our story cannot be broken? Fragile Civilizations is not only a story of the past, it is also a mirror held up to ourselves. When we look closely at what remains of the Maya, the Indus, and Rome, we see fragments of lives once as real and vibrant as our own. We see bustling marketplaces, processions through temples, families who thought their world was stable. And then, almost without warning, the ground shifted. The Maya had cities filled with plazas, pyramids, and observatories. They charted the heavens, predicting eclipses and solstices with astonishing precision. They wrote in hieroglyphs and built an intricate calendar system that reached far beyond their own time. Yet a series of droughts struck the region. Crops failed, political alliances fractured, the forests reclaimed the stone. What was once the centre of a thriving world dissolved into silence. The Indus Valley is no less striking. Here, 5,000 years ago, people built cities on precise grids. They constructed advanced drainage systems with covered sewers and standardized bricks. They cultivated crops and traded as far away as Mesopotamia. Then, as rivers shifted and floods struck, the system unraveled. Entire cities were abandoned. The bricks remained, but the voices were gone. Rome tells a different story. At its peak, Rome ruled vast territories with laws, engineering, and architecture that still inspire us today. Roads stretched across Europe. Aqueducts carried water over great distances. Colosseums hosted crowds of tens of thousands. Yet corruption spread borders, weakened, and waves of invasion broke across the empire. A world that once called itself eternal fractured into smaller kingdoms, leaving ruins as its legacy. Each of these collapses was shaped by local circumstances, yet each collapse reminds us of the same truth. No matter how powerful, no civilization is safe from change. Complexity may slow decline, but it cannot prevent it. Now step back. If collapse can happen to civilizations, we know in the narrow window of recorded history what might the long stretches of silence hide. 97% of human existence is undocumented. That is not a theory, but a simple fact of math. 200,000 years of modern humans, only 6,000 with writing. Imagine a library filled with 200 volumes. Each book represents 1,000 years. We open the shelves and discover that 194 of those books are blank. Only the last 6 contain writing. Those are the volumes we study, analyze, and call history. But what about the blank ones? Do they mean nothing happened, or that what was written there has been erased? The Earth is not a gentle archivist. It is a restless surface constantly reshaping itself. Forests overgrow, rivers change course, deserts spread, seas advance. Even within 1,000 years, a city can vanish. Within 10,000, little will remain. If evidence of a civilization were left on a shoreline before the last ice age today, it would lie beneath more than 100 meters of water. This is why the silence may not be a void, but a veil. Beneath it could lie forgotten ages, civilizations erased by resets. We do not need to imagine impossibilities. We need only to imagine the ordinary processes of geology working for long enough. Think of what would happen if our world were abandoned tomorrow. Skyscrapers of steel and glass would begin to crumble within decades. Roads would crack and forests would push through. Within centuries, concrete would break apart, bridges would collapse, and metals would corrode into dust. 1,000 years later, the traces of our cities would be hard to find. 10,000 years later, almost nothing would remain above ground. And yet, from our perspective, our cities feel permanent. They are not. They are temporary sculptures in a landscape that always reclaims its space. If a future species were to look back 100,000 years from now, they might find only fragments, shards of pottery, or outlines of foundations. They would see silence, and they might assume nothing had existed. When we return to the idea of reset, it is important to understand that it is not about sudden extinction alone. A reset is a change in the rules of the game, sometimes slow, sometimes violent, but always transformative. Civilizations depend on climate stability, on fertile soil, on predictable rivers, on trade routes that remain open. Change any of these and the structures of society can fall apart quickly. The Maya could not endure a generation of drought. The Indus could not endure shifting rivers. Rome could not endure endless waves of pressure. Each reset was local, but each showed how fragile human complexity can be. Now imagine those pressures on a global scale. A climate shift not of decades, but of millennia. A sea level rise not of feet, but of hundreds of feet. A volcanic eruption that darkens skies for years. An asteroid that changes the very chemistry of the atmosphere. This is why the silence matters. It is not simply empty space on a timeline. It is a reminder that our story may not be the first. That resets have the power to erase not only buildings and governments, but memory itself. When memory is gone, stories vanish, knowledge fades, and history is reduced to myth. So when we ask the question, what if Earth has been reset thousands of times, we're not asking for fantasy. We are asking whether the missing pages in our library are the result of a force that has always been at work. Fragile Civilizations is the starting point. It shows us that collapse is not extraordinary, but ordinary. That even societies which believed themselves eternal were only temporary. And that we standing in our cities speaking through technology may not be as different as we believe. If the past is filled with blank pages and if civilizations are more fragile than they appear, then the possibility of reset becomes more than speculation. It becomes a lens through which we must examine not only our history but our present. And so we continue. From the silence of history, we will turn to the language of the earth itself. We will listen to the stones, the ice, the layers of ash. Because in those layers lies the story of resets written not in myth, but in geology. A story that does not ask if resets happen, but how often and what they mean for us. Fragile Civilizations is more than a warning from history. It is a pattern that repeats. Rise, flourish, decline, silence. The cycle is written not only in ruins but in the rhythm of our species itself. For 200,000 years, humans like us have walked this planet. We have the same bodies, the same brains, the same potential. Yet for most of that time, the archaeological record is quiet. Stone tools remained simple for tens of thousands of years. Then, almost overnight, cave paintings bloom on walls in Europe. Carvings, musical instruments, and complex hunting tools appear around 40,000 years ago. It is called the creative explosion. Why so sudden? If humans had the same capacities for hundreds of thousands of years, why would creativity arrive so late? One possibility is that it did not arrive late at all. Perhaps it arrived before in earlier cycles and was lost. Perhaps the explosion we see in the record is not a beginning but a recovery after a reset. This way of thinking changes how we read history. Instead of one long climb, we see a staircase broken by gaps. Each gap may represent collapse. Each leap forward may represent rebuilding. In this sense, fragility is not only about endings, it is also about beginnings. Look again at the silence of history. It is easy to believe nothing happened. But consider how knowledge itself survives. Complex skills do not endure when societies collapse. Agriculture, writing, architecture, and navigation all depend on a network of people and resources. If the network breaks, the knowledge evaporates in a single generation. Survivors return to simple tools not because they forgot who they were, but because survival demanded simplicity. Over time, new generations might rebuild. They might discover again what had been lost. To future archaeologists, it would appear sudden, as if complexity emerged from nowhere. But in reality, it would be the echo of something once known. This is the essence of reset. Not annihilation, but transformation. Old worlds end. New ones begin. The people who live through it carry fragments of memory. They tell stories of floods of fire, of great darkness. They turn them into myths so that even when objects vanish, the memory lingers. We see this in traditions around the world. Tales of the world ending in water, in flame, in ice. Tales of ages destroyed and rebuilt. At first, they sound like imagination. But placed beside the geological record, they sound like memory. What unites the Maya, the Indus and Rome is not only that they fell, but that each left behind fragments that shaped those who came after. Later generations built on ruins. Later cultures inherited roads, calendars, stories. Civilization does not fall into nothing. It falls into fragments, and fragments become seeds. Still, the lesson remains sobering. Fragility means that nothing is guaranteed. Not even us. Today our world feels strong. We connect across oceans. We build towers into the sky. We split atoms and send machines into space. It feels permanent. Yet permanence has never been part of the human story. If collapse visited the Maya, the Indus and Rome, it can visit us. The difference is scale. Our civilization is global. Our networks are woven across continents. That makes us powerful. It also makes us vulnerable. For when a network stretches across the whole world, its collapse would not be local. It would be planetary. What if Earth has indeed been reset thousands of times? Then we are simply the latest chapter. Our monuments may endure for a while, but in 10,000 years they will fade like all others. In 100,000 years they will vanish almost completely. If survivors remain, they will tell stories. If no one remains, silence will return. Fragile civilizations is not just history. It is a reminder that we stand on temporary ground. We live in the brief moment of stability between resets. That moment feels endless, but it is not. To understand this fully, we must now leave archaeology and turn to the Earth itself. Because the Earth carries its own memory, not in books or scrolls, but in layers of stone in ice cores in the chemistry of the soil. The Earth does not forget. It records every eruption, every impact, every flood, every shift of climate. And when we read those layers, we see a truth far more unsettling than any myth. The Earth has already been reset. Not once, not twice, but again and again. The question is not whether resets happen. The question is whether humanity has been caught in their path more often than we realize. We began this journey with the fall of Maya, Indus and Rome because their stories are familiar. They show us fragility we cannot deny, but they are only the surface. Beneath them lies a deeper story, one that stretches far beyond human memory into the cycles of ice and fire that shape the planet itself. And so, as Act 1 closes, we leave the ruins of civilizations we can still touch and step into the geological record that reveals civilizations we may never know. The silence of history prepares us. The Earth itself will now speak. Earth writes in stone. If we want to understand the idea of reset, we must first listen to the Earth itself. Civilizations come and go, but the Earth records every change in layers of rock and ice, in fossils, in scars carved deep into its surface. Unlike human memory, the Earth does not forget. And what it shows us is unsettling. The history of this planet is not gentle or continuous. It is broken by sudden interruptions, by violent upheavals that end one chapter of life and begin another. Scientists call them mass extinctions. The Earth has lived through 5 of them. The first came more than 400 million years ago in the Ordovician period. Most life then lived in the seas, and then within a geologic instant nearly all of it was gone. Ice sheets expanded, oceans fell, ecosystems collapsed. The second, the Devonian extinction, struck about 370 million years ago. Coral reefs died out. Entire families of fish disappeared. The seas emptied, and it would take tens of millions of years to recover. The third was the deadliest. The Permian extinction 250 million years ago wiped out more than 90% of all species. Volcanoes erupted for thousands of years, filling the skies with ash and gas. The oceans turned acidic. The air grew toxic. For a moment in time, the Earth itself became almost uninhabitable. The fourth, the Triassic extinction about 200 million years ago, cleared the way for dinosaurs to dominate. And the fifth, perhaps the most famous, ended the age of dinosaurs 65 million years ago. A rock from the heavens, an asteroid 6 miles wide, slammed into what is now Mexico. The impact released the power of billions of nuclear weapons. Firestorms swept continents. The sky darkened. Sunlight failed. Plants died, then animals. The dinosaurs, after ruling for more than 100 million years, vanished. And in the silence that followed, mammals rose. Mass extinctions show us that reset is not a myth. It is not speculation. It is part of the natural order. Life itself has been erased and restarted again and again. If nature has been reset, why not humanity as well? Now turn from asteroids and volcanoes to another force quieter, but just as devastating. Ice. For millions of years, the Earth's climate has swung back and forth between warm periods and long stretches of cold. During each ice age, vast sheets of ice miles thick spread across the northern hemisphere. They crushed mountains, carved valleys, and buried entire landscapes. Then they retreated, melting back toward the poles, raising sea levels, flooding coasts. And then, after thousands of years of warmth, they advanced again. One of the most mysterious episodes occurred just 12,800 years ago. The world was warming after the last ice age. Rivers swelled, glaciers melted, seas began to rise, and then suddenly the climate snapped back to cold. For more than 1,000 years, ice returned. Crops failed, species disappeared, and human populations were thrown into crisis. Scientists call this the Younger Dryas. What caused it? Some believe a comet or asteroid struck the planet, sending debris into the atmosphere and fire across the land. Others argue for natural changes in ocean currents, a sudden shift in the flow of warmth that regulates the Earth's climate. Whatever the cause, the effect was catastrophic. Imagine if a civilization had been rising at that time, farming, trading, building. Overnight their world would have collapsed into ice and fire. Their traces would be gone, buried beneath glaciers or drowned by the floods that followed. This is the power of ice as an eraser. It does not simply destroy, it rewrites the surface itself. Cities, if they existed 20,000 years ago, would now lie hundreds of feet below the sea, or crushed under rock left behind by retreating glaciers. And if ice was not enough, the Earth had fire waiting beneath its surface. 74,000 years ago, a volcano in Indonesia called Toba erupted with unimaginable force. It was the largest eruption in the last 2 million years. Ash rained across Asia and Africa. Temperatures dropped worldwide. For years, the skies were dim, crops withered, and ecosystems collapsed. Genetic studies suggest that humanity itself may have passed through a bottleneck at this time, shrinking to perhaps only a few thousand survivors. If true, then every human alive today descends from those who endured the ash and the cold. The story of Toba is not just about survival. It is about fragility. If humanity could be reduced to a handful of survivors by one eruption, what else might have been lost? Could a small society, perhaps more complex than we imagine, have disappeared entirely erased without leaving a trace? Scientists debate how severe the bottleneck really was. Some regions seem to have been less affected. But the point remains. One mountain exploding was enough to push our species to the edge. That is reset. That is how quickly the rules can change. We have seen extinctions from the sky. We have seen glaciers grind the earth. We have seen fire rise from beneath. But there is another force just as powerful. Water. At the end of the last ice age, as glaciers melted, the oceans rose by more than 100 meters. Entire coastlines disappeared. Vast areas of land that had once been prime for settlement were swallowed by the sea. Today, nearly all of our greatest cities sit beside the ocean. If ancient people followed the same pattern, then many of their settlements would now lie underwater. In Greece, the remains of Pavlopetri, a planned city with streets and courtyards, lie a few meters beneath the waves. In India, ruins near Dwarka suggest settlements built before the sea consumed them. Off the coast of Japan, the Yonaguni structures resemble terraces and steps, though debate continues over whether they are natural or human-made. What we know for certain is that the sea is relentless. It takes land, it buries memory, it swallows history. If resets have erased civilizations, the ocean is the most likely culprit. For water is the greatest archivist and the greatest destroyer, preserving some fragments while hiding them beyond reach. Mass extinctions, ice fire, rising seas, each is powerful on its own. Together they remind us of the same truth. The Earth does not stand still, it moves in cycles. And in those cycles, civilizations are fragile. The Earth has always been restless. Its surface is not fixed but alive, shifting, cracking and folding upon itself. To live here is to live on moving ground. And when that ground changes, it resets everything that stands upon it. Mass extinctions, glaciers, volcanoes and rising seas are not isolated curiosities. They are part of a repeating rhythm, a rhythm of destruction and renewal. And when we look at that rhythm closely, we begin to see what reset truly means. Take the Chicxulub impact, the asteroid that ended the reign of the dinosaurs. 65 million years ago, life was abundant forests full of giant reptiles, oceans swarming with predators, skies filled with wings. In one instant, that world was gone. The asteroid struck with unimaginable power. Shockwaves travelled across the planet. Fires burned continents. A cloud of dust and sulphur darkened the skies for years. Plants withered, animals starved, and ecosystems collapsed. But what followed is just as important. Mammals small and overlooked until then survived. They multiplied, evolved, and within millions of years gave rise to us. Reset does not end the story. Reset writes a new chapter. Now think of the Ice Ages. They too were cycles of destruction and rebirth. Every 100,000 years or so, ice crept southward. Valleys filled with glaciers. Forests vanished beneath sheets of white. For tens of thousands of years, much of the northern world was uninhabitable. Then the ice retreated. Rivers returned. Forests regrew. Coasts redrew themselves. And in those warmer intervals, humans thrived. The Younger Dryas shows how sudden such shifts could be. Just when the world seemed to be warming, ice returned. Crops failed, animals disappeared, populations scattered. 1,000 years of struggle followed before the warmth returned. If a civilization had been rising, then it would have been crushed, its traces hidden under layers of ice and flood. Fire from within the earth brings the same lesson. The eruption of Toba is one example, but it is not alone. Volcanoes across history have darkened skies, poisoned air, and forced migrations. Mount Tambora in 1815 caused the year without a summer, when crops failed across the globe and famine struck. That was a small reminder of what the Earth can do when its pressure is released. Multiply that 1,000-fold and you have Toba. The sea tells yet another story. During the last glacial maximum, sea levels were 400 feet lower than they are today. Whole continents were larger. Lands now hidden beneath the ocean were dry and fertile. When the ice melted, the oceans rose. Imagine the coastlines of the time. Villages, towns, even cities, if they existed, would have been built near the shore. Within generations, those shores were drowned. We see hints of this in Pavlopetri Dwarka and Yonaguni. Pavlopetri in Greece is clearly a planned city with walls, streets and courtyards now lying beneath shallow water. Dwarka off the coast of India aligns with ancient texts that describe a city swallowed by the sea. Yonaguni is more contested, some say natural, others insist human-made. But whether or not these sites prove advanced civilizations, they remind us of one truth. The sea does not preserve coastlines. It takes them. Today, more than half of humanity lives within 60 miles of the ocean. If the seas rose by 100 meters as they did at the end of the last ice age, nearly every major city on Earth would vanish. New York, London, Shanghai, Mumbai, Tokyo, all gone. 1,000 years later, only fragments would remain deep beneath the waves. 10,000 years later, perhaps nothing recognizable at all. This is why water may be the most powerful reset of all. Not as sudden as an asteroid or a volcano, but just as final. Quiet, relentless, inevitable. And so the Earth writes in stone, in ice, in ash, in drowned coastlines. Each layer tells the same story. The world changes, life collapses, Then life begins again. When we look at these records, the idea of reset is not a stretch. It is not wild speculation. It is the natural history of the planet. The question is not whether resets occur. They do. The question is whether human civilization in its long silence before recorded history has already lived through them. Imagine a world 20,000 years ago. Ice covers much of the north. The oceans are lower. Coasts stretch further. People live near the sea as they do today. Then the ice melts. The seas rise. Villages vanish. Generations later, no one remembers exactly what was lost. They only carry stories. Stories of floods of gods who punished of worlds that ended. These stories survive even when cities do not. They are told again and again until they become myth. But perhaps they are not only myth. Perhaps they are memory dimmed by time. This is where science and story meet. The earth gives us the evidence. The myths give us the echoes. Together they point toward the possibility that resets have not only shaped life in general, but humanity in particular. The earth writes in stone, but it also erases. A city can crumble, a text can burn, people can scatter. In the scale of geology, even the greatest achievements vanish quickly. What remains are scars, ash layers, ice cores, and legends. And if we are willing to see them together, we begin to understand. Reset is not an idea waiting to be proven. Reset is a pattern already written into the planet itself. The only question is how many times it has included us. Earth writes in stone is more than a phrase. It is a reminder that the ground beneath us is not just soil but memory. Each layer of rock, each band of ice, each bed of ash tells of a reset. Some are slow, some are sudden, but all leave scars. Consider the evidence preserved in ice cores drilled from Greenland and Antarctica. Inside those frozen cylinders lie tiny bubbles of ancient air. Scientists can measure the gases within them and reconstruct the climate year by year going back hundreds of thousands of years. What they see is not stability. It is fluctuation. Temperatures rise and fall. Carbon dioxide waxes and wanes. Periods of warmth give way to cold in abrupt swings. These are the rhythms of the earth, and they shape everything living upon it. The younger Dryas stands out as one of the sharpest turns in this record. The planet was warming the ice, retreating the seas rising. Then in a geological instant the world snapped back into cold. Ice sheets grew again, forests died back. For more than 1,000 years the planet was locked in a sudden chill. Some researchers believe a comet or asteroid triggered this event, igniting fires across continents and sending dust into the sky. Others point to changes in the Atlantic currents, a collapse in the conveyor belt of warmth that flows through the oceans. Whatever the cause, the effect was catastrophic. If a society had been emerging, then building, farming, trading, it would have been wiped away. The traces would be hidden beneath layers of ice and floods. All that might remain would be stories passed down through generations, tales of a world suddenly frozen. The Earth's stone layers carry other signatures as well. Around 74,000 years ago, a blanket of volcanic ash spread across Asia and Africa. That ash came from the eruption of Toba in Indonesia, the largest eruption in 2 million years. Its effects were global. The skies dimmed, temperatures fell, crops failed. Genetic studies suggest that humanity itself may have been reduced to just a few thousand survivors. Imagine the scene. Darkness at noon. A red sun dimmed by haze. Ash falling like snow. Forests stripped bare. Rivers poisoned. In such a world, survival would be nearly impossible. A small band of people might endure, but any larger society, if one existed, would be erased completely. The debate continues about how severe this bottleneck was. Some evidence suggests certain populations survived with less damage. But the possibility remains clear. A single eruption could push our species to the edge. This is what reset looks like. It is not abstract. It is a force that can shrink humanity to near extinction. Then there is water. If ice and fire are violent, water is patient but no less deadly. When the last ice age ended, the oceans rose by more than 100 meters. Imagine the maps of that time. Continents stretched further. Coastlines lay miles beyond today's shores. Human settlements almost certainly clustered along those ancient coasts just as they do today. And when the seas rose, those settlements were drowned. We see hints of this in the Mediterranean, where Pavlopetri lies beneath shallow waves. Streets, walls and courtyards remain preserved by the sea. In India, ruins near Dwarka align with ancient texts that describe a city lost to the ocean. Off Japan's coast, the Yonaguni formations resemble terraces and steps. Whether natural or human, may they remind us that the sea has no mercy for memory. Consider our world now. More than half of humanity lives within 60 miles of the ocean. Our greatest cities sit on coasts. New York, London, Shanghai, Mumbai, Tokyo, all depend on a stable shoreline. If the oceans were to rise by 100 meters again, every one of them would vanish. Imagine the silence that would follow. Imagine the myths future generations might tell of cities that once touched the sky, but now lie beneath the waves. The Earth's stone record shows us floods on a planetary scale. It shows us layers of ash that blanket continents. It shows us shifts in ice that grind mountains flat. Each of these is a reset, a rewriting of the surface, a clearing of the stage, and still life endures. After every extinction, after every eruption, after every flood, life returns. It may look different, it may take new forms, but it comes back. Mammals rose after the dinosaurs, humans spread after the ice retreated, civilizations grew after the seas settled. The Earth's lesson is clear. Resets are not rare, they are normal. The question is not whether they will happen again. The question is when, and whether we will survive them. When we look back through these geological records, we begin to see how fragile our place truly is. We are not separate from these cycles. We are part of them. Civilizations like the Maya, the Indus and Rome remind us that fragility exists even in small scales. The Earth's stone records remind us that fragility exists on a planetary scale. Together they point to the same truth. Permanence is an illusion. What if Earth has been reset thousands of times? Then we're only one chapter among many. Our achievements may endure for centuries, perhaps millennia, but in deep time they too will vanish. The Earth will remember not our monuments but our scars. Layers of carbon, traces of plastic, faint records of an age that believed itself eternal. As Act 2 continues, we will dive deeper into these forces. Extinctions, ice, fire, water. Each is a reset written in stone. Each is a reminder that the ground we walk on is never still. And each brings us closer to the unsettling possibility that humanity itself has lived through resets before and may face them again. The Earth writes in stone, but it also erases. This is the paradox we face. The planet keeps records of its violence, but those records are often scars, not stories. We see ash layers, but not the cities they may have buried. We see ice cores, but not the people who may have suffered beneath them. We see coastlines redrawn, but not the towns swallowed whole. This is why silence dominates so much of the human timeline. Our species has been here for 200,000 years, yet written history covers only the last 6. The rest is a vast silence filled with possibilities, and when we compare that silence to what the Earth's layers reveal, the idea of reset becomes less speculative and more inevitable. Think again about the 5 mass extinctions. They were not small accidents. Each one reshaped the planet. Each one cleared the stage and set the conditions for a new act of life. They are the clearest evidence we have that resets are built into the fabric of Earth itself. When we speak of extinction, it is tempting to imagine sudden apocalypse, a day when everything ends. But in truth, most resets are processes. They unfold over centuries, sometimes millennia. From the perspective of a human life, they are invisible. From the perspective of deep time, they are abrupt. Civilizations that existed during such transitions would have been trapped, unable to adapt fast enough. Their memory would be gone long before we could discover it. Glaciers, for example, advance and retreat over tens of thousands of years. But the younger Dryas showed that climate can also shift in decades. A world warming quickly turned back to ice. That is fast enough to collapse crops, break societies, scatter survivors. It is exactly the kind of event that would erase history before it could be written. Volcanoes work the same way. Tambora was enough to cause famine around the globe in the 19th century. Toba tens of thousands of years earlier was orders of magnitude greater. If that eruption nearly erased humanity itself, what else might it have destroyed? Perhaps we will never know. The ash covered too much for too long. And then there is water, the quietest destroyer. Unlike asteroids or volcanoes, water moves without spectacle. Sea levels rise slowly inch by inch. But when they rise 100 meters, the result is the same as fire from the sky. Cities vanish, farmlands drown, populations scatter. 1,000 years later, nothing remains but legends. This brings us to the heart of the matter. Resets are not speculation. They are observable in the record of the Earth. The silence of human history is not a blank canvas, but a veil. Behind that veil, entire chapters may have been written and erased. What if civilizations once rose along coasts now underwater? What if societies once thrived in valleys later buried by ice? What if cultures once flourished on lands now lost to deserts or seas? The Earth gives us no certainty. It gives us only scars, gaps, and fragments. The rest we must imagine. And yet even imagination has boundaries. It must be guided by evidence. That is why we distinguish between fact hypothesis and rebuttal. The facts are clear. Extinctions happened. Ice ages advanced and retreated. Volcanoes erupted. Seas rose. These are not theories. They are written in stone. The hypothesis is equally simple. If resets have shaped all other life, then they may have shaped us too. Civilizations may have risen and fallen before the one we know. Their traces may be hidden or destroyed by the very forces we see in the Earth's record. The rebuttal matters too. We must remember that no city older than 10 or 12,000 years has been confirmed. No text predates 6,000. Mainstream science is right to demand evidence. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. Until we find it, resets remain a possibility, not a certainty. But possibility matters. It reshapes how we see ourselves. If the Earth resets again, as it surely will, then we too are fragile. Our skyscrapers, our satellites, our digital memory, all of it is temporary. The Earth will outlast it. The Earth always does. And perhaps this is the true meaning of reset. Not the end of the world, but the end of certainty. Not destruction for its own sake, but transformation. After every extinction, life returned. After every ice age, forest regrew. After every flood, new coasts became fertile. After every eruption, green shoots emerged from the ash. The Earth writes in stone, but it writes in cycles, and we are part of that cycle. As Act 2 draws to a close, we stand at a threshold. We have seen the facts of geology, the scars of extinction, the erasures of ice, fire, and water. We have seen that reset is not an invention, but a pattern. What we have not seen is whether humanity has already been part of that pattern. To answer that question, we must leave the rocks and turn to the ruins, the myths and the anomalies that do not fit into the official story. They are the whispers of lost ages fragments that suggest resets may have shaped not only the natural world but the human story as well. And so in the next act we will listen for those whispers. We will follow the clues of Göbekli Tepe, of maps that should not exist, of artifacts out of place, of myths that repeat across oceans. We will step from the firm ground of geology into the shadows of possibility. Because if the Earth has been reset thousands of times, then perhaps our history is not what we think it is. Whispers of lost ages. The Earth has shown us the scars of extinction, of ice, of fire, of flood. Now we turn to the human story. In the silence of prehistory, we find fragments that do not fit neatly into the timeline we are taught. They are puzzles, anomalies, whispers of worlds that may have existed before us. Some of these whispers come in stone. In southern Turkey stands one of the most extraordinary sites ever uncovered, Göbekli Tepe. It was built nearly 12,000 years ago, long before the invention of writing, before agriculture, before the rise of permanent settlements. Yet the site is massive. Rings of enormous carved pillars, some weighing more than 10 tons, arranged in circles, and decorated with intricate reliefs of animals. By the traditional view, the people of that time were simple hunter-gatherers. They should not have had the organization, the surplus food, or the engineering skill to build anything on this scale. And yet, Göbekli Tepe exists. The site is real, and its age is confirmed by radiocarbon dating. It may be the legacy of an earlier civilization, one erased by a reset. Mainstream archaeologists argue that hunter-gatherers were more capable than we assume. With enough hands and enough time, they could carve and raise stones. Göbekli Tepe, they say, does not prove a lost civilization. It proves that our ancestors were more ingenious than we gave them credit for. Still, the site forces us to reconsider. If people before farming could build something so complex, what else might they have been capable of? And what else may have been lost? Other sites raise the same questions. At Puma Punku in Bolivia, enormous blocks of stone lie scattered, some weighing more than 100 tons, carved with surprising precision. The angles are sharp, the cuts exact, and the blocks fit together almost like puzzle pieces. How they were shaped remains a matter of debate. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid of Giza stands with astonishing alignment to the cardinal directions, and its construction remains one of the most impressive feats of ancient engineering. Some argue that its proportions encode mathematical constants and astronomical knowledge. These monuments exist. They are among the wonders of the ancient world. The precision they display could be evidence of knowledge carried over from earlier cycles, fragments of memory preserved across resets. Engineers and archaeologists explain them through simple tools, clever techniques, and massive labor forces. To them, there is no need to invoke a forgotten civilization. Yet even they admit that the precision is remarkable. Ruins like Göbekli Tepe, Puma Punku, and Giza remind us that the past is not always as simple as the textbooks suggest. They are anomalies standing just outside the neat timeline of progress, inviting us to wonder whether human knowledge has been rediscovered more than once. From ruins, we turn to maps, another kind of whisper. The most famous is the Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral. It shows the coasts of Europe, Africa, and South America, with surprising accuracy for its time. But what draws attention is the southern landmass it depicts. Some argue that it resembles Antarctica shown without ice. The map exists, and Piri Reis himself claimed it was based on older sources. If those sources included coastlines that are now ice-covered, then they may have been copied from maps made thousands of years earlier, perhaps before the last ice age ended. Most historians reject this interpretation. They argue that the southern landmass is simply a distorted continuation of South America. The accuracy of the coast, they say, can be explained by the combination of known maps of the time. There is no need to imagine an advanced lost civilization charting Antarctica. Yet the puzzle remains. Why would Piri Reis claim he used sources older than his own era? What were those sources and where did they come from? Even if the Antarctica claim is wrong, the existence of such anomalies forces us to ask how much knowledge may have circulated and been forgotten long before modern history began. The whispers of lost ages are not proof. They are questions. They are cracks in the official story where light filters through. Göbekli Tepe should not exist in its time. Puma Punku should not have been possible with stone tools. The Piri Reis map should not show what it shows. Each case has explanations, rebuttals, and controversies, but together they form a chorus of whispers. What if they are fragments of earlier cycles? What if they are reminders that history is not a straight line, but a series of resets with each new rise inheriting pieces of the one before? As we continue through this journey, we will follow more of these anomalies, artifacts out of place, myths that repeat across oceans, stories of lands swallowed by the sea. Each one adds to the chorus until the silence of history begins to sound less like emptiness and more like a memory just out of reach. Whispers of lost ages do not end with ruins or maps. They also appear in objects small enough to hold in your hand. Some are tools, some are fragments, some are mysteries pulled from the ground or the sea. Collectively, they are called artifacts out of place. The most famous is the Antikythera mechanism. Discovered in a shipwreck off the coast of Greece in the early 20th century, it first appeared to be nothing more than a corroded lump of bronze. But when scientists examined it more closely, they found a device of astonishing sophistication. Inside were gears arranged with delicate precision designed to track the motions of the heavens. It could predict eclipses, chart the positions of the planets, and model the cycles of the moon. The Antikythera mechanism dates to around 200 years before Christ. It is real, and it works. If such a device existed in the ancient world, perhaps it was not unique. Perhaps knowledge like this disappeared, and was rediscovered in cycles. The mechanism might be evidence of a deeper technological tradition, one erased by time. Mainstream historians see it differently. They believe the Antikythera mechanism was an extraordinary invention, but a singular one not representative of an entire age. It was a brilliant creation, but not a sign of a lost civilization. Still, it reminds us that technology can vanish, and reappear long after. For more than 1,000 years after the mechanism, nothing else like it was built. How many other devices may have been lost to the sea or destroyed by fire or melted down for metal? Other artifacts are more controversial. In South Africa, miners have uncovered small metallic spheres with grooves etched around them. Known as the Klerksdorp spheres, they are found in geological layers said to be billions of years old. Some believe they are natural formations. Others argue their symmetry suggests something artificial. In other cases, objects resembling nails or tools have been reported in layers of rock thought to be hundreds of thousands of years old. If genuine, they would overturn everything we think we know about the timeline of technology. These objects exist. They have been photographed and studied. Some may be relics of earlier civilizations, perhaps from cycles long before our own. Most scientists explain them as natural curiosities, misidentifications, or even hoaxes. The grooves on the spheres can be created by natural processes. Nails found in ancient rock may have slipped in through cracks, or been contaminated during excavation. The truth is elusive. Many of these anomalies remain unresolved, either dismissed or left unexplored, but they serve a purpose. They remind us that our timeline is not as solid as it seems, that there are puzzles at the edges of history pieces that do not fit neatly into the story we tell ourselves. Taken individually, any one of these anomalies might be explained away. Taken together, they form a pattern, not of certainty but of possibility, a pattern that whispers of forgotten ages of resets that erased more than we know. This is the power of anomalies. They may not prove lost civilizations, but they challenge the neatness of the official story. They suggest that our history is incomplete, that there are gaps waiting to be filled, and then there are the myths. Stories carried not in stone or metal but in memory. Stories told and retold until they become legend. Stories that might be the faint voices of survivors. Everywhere we look in the ancient world we find myths of floods. The story of Noah in the Bible, the tale of Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the story of Manu in India warned of a great deluge and saved by a divine guide. In Greece, Deucalion and Pyrrha survive a flood that drowns the world. In Polynesia, legends tell of islands swallowed by the sea. These myths exist across continents separated by oceans and centuries. They may be cultural memories of the same event passed down by survivors of rising seas at the end of the last ice age. Scholars argue that floods are a universal human experience. Rivers overflow, storms surge, villages are drowned. Each culture may have invented its own story. The similarities they say are coincidence, and yet the parallels are striking. A flood that drowns the world. A chosen survivor warned. A boat, an ark, or a vessel built to endure. A new beginning after the waters recede. It is difficult to ignore the repetition. Myths also speak of fire. In Norse tradition, Ragnarok ends the world in flames before it is reborn green and fertile. Among some Native American peoples, stories tell of earlier worlds destroyed by fire from the sky. In Hindu cosmology, time itself is divided into great cycles, each ending in destruction and renewal. Fire has shaped the earth in real ways. Asteroids have struck. Volcanoes have erupted, entire landscapes have burned. These myths may be memories of such catastrophes turned into stories to explain the unexplainable. Myths are symbolic. They may be morality tales or religious visions, not memories of real events. And yet they echo what geology tells us, that the earth has burned, flooded, frozen, and restarted many times. The whispers of lost ages come from ruins, from maps, from artifacts, and from myths. Each on its own is ambiguous. Each can be explained away. But together they suggest that silence is not empty. That history may be deeper, stranger, and more cyclical than we imagine. As we continue, we will look more closely at the myths of lands lost beneath the sea. Atlantis described by Plato. Dwarka described in Indian texts and now found beneath the waves. These stories may be allegories, or they may be memories of resets. Either way, they continue to haunt us, calling from the depths with whispers of worlds erased. Among the most enduring whispers of lost ages is the story of Atlantis. The tale comes to us from the Greek philosopher Plato, writing in the 4th century before Christ. He described a great island civilization beyond the Pillars of Hercules, a society rich, powerful, and advanced. In a single day and night of catastrophe, he wrote, Atlantis was swallowed by the sea. Plato's story exists. It is among the earliest and most influential myths of a vanished civilization. Atlantis may have been a memory of a real place destroyed at the end of the last ice age when seas rose and coastlines drowned. Most scholars see Atlantis as allegory. Plato may have invented it as a moral story, a warning about hubris and corruption. Whether allegory or memory, the story has endured for millennia. It resonates because it echoes other tales of worlds lost to the sea, and it speaks to a fear that has never left us, that civilizations, no matter how advanced, can vanish suddenly. In India, ancient texts tell of Dwarka, the city of the god Krishna. It was said to be magnificent, with palaces of crystal and streets shining like mirrors, and like Atlantis, it was said to have sunk beneath the waves. For centuries it was only legend. Then divers exploring off the coast of modern Dwarka found submerged ruins. Stone-walled streets and artifacts suggested that a city once stood there, later consumed by the ocean. The underwater ruins near Dwarka exist. Archaeological evidence places them thousands of years old. Dwarka may be a memory of one of the many cities lost as sea levels rose after the last ice age. Mainstream archaeology accepts the ruins as real, but dates them within the known historical timeline. They may not prove a lost civilization older than history, but they show how myths can preserve kernels of truth. Atlantis and Dwarka are not alone. Around the world, stories speak of lands swallowed by water. In Polynesia, oral traditions describe islands that once existed and later sank. In the Caribbean, legends tell of cities drowned in floods. In each case, the story is the same, a great place lost to the sea, leaving only fragments and memory. At the end of the last ice age, global sea levels rose by more than 100 meters, drowning vast coastal areas. These myths may be cultural memories of that rise told and retold until they became legend. Flood myths are common because flooding is universal. Every culture near rivers or coasts has seen water rise and destroy. The similarities may come from shared human experience, rather than a single global catastrophe. Yet we return to the silence of history. 97% of our past is blank. In that silence, myths may be the only voice. If fragments of memory were carried through resets, myths are where they would survive. And perhaps this is their purpose, to preserve the memory of catastrophe, to warn the future that the earth can change suddenly, that what feels permanent is fragile. Myths may exaggerate, distort, and shift in detail, but their structure remains the same. A world destroyed, a handful of survivors, a new beginning. These stories echo the very cycles we see in geology. Floods at the end of ice ages, fire from volcanic eruptions and asteroid impacts, ice advancing and retreating, resets written both in stone and in story. This does not mean every myth is literal truth. It means myths may hold fragments of memory, pieces of events so immense that survivors could only explain them in story. The details blur, the lessons remain. Atlantis, Dwarka, and other tales of drowned worlds may never be proven. They may remain myths, but their persistence across cultures is striking. Different names, different lands, but the same theme, a civilization thought eternal gone in an instant. And that theme matters. It matters because it mirrors the geological record. It matters because it forces us to ask what may lie beneath the seas under the ice or lost in ash. And it matters because it reminds us of our own fragility. What if Plato's story of Atlantis was not invention, but memory? What if Dwarka is one of many cities lost at the end of the last ice age? What if the myths of floods and fires are not metaphors but echoes of real resets? The Earth's layers tell us that floods, fires and ice have come before. Myths tell us that survivors remembered them. Taken together, they form a bridge between science and story, a bridge that leads us to consider the possibility of lost ages. Whispers of lost ages are not shouts. They are faint, scattered, fragile. A ruin here, a map there, an artifact out of place, a myth passed down. None is definitive. All are disputed. But together they hint at something larger, a pattern we cannot quite see, a memory just out of reach. As we continue, we will look at these anomalies not as proof, but as possibility. We will ask whether history is a straight line, or whether it has been broken and restarted many times. And we will consider what it means if our civilization is only the latest, fragile as the ones before. The whispers do not give us answers, they give us questions, and sometimes questions are more powerful than certainty. Whispers of lost ages grow louder when myths, ruins, and anomalies begin to align. Separately they can be dismissed. Together they form a chorus that challenges our assumptions about history. Flood myths, fire myths, and stories of destruction are not confined to a single region. They appear across the globe. The Hebrew Bible tells of Noah and the Ark, a flood that covered the world. Long before the Sumerians told of Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh, warned by the gods to build a vessel that saved his family and animals. In India, the ancient texts speak of Manu guided by a divine being to survive a great deluge. In Greece, Deucalion and Pyrrha repopulate the earth after floodwaters destroy humankind. In Polynesia, islanders recount that entire lands once above water were swallowed by the sea. The similarities are undeniable. Water rising a chosen survivor, a vessel and a new beginning. At the end of the last ice age, seas rose more than 100 meters. Coastlines changed dramatically. Entire regions were drowned. These stories may be cultural memories of that time encoded into myth and preserved across generations. Floods are common. Every culture near water experiences them. The similarity of stories may reflect shared human experiences rather than one single event. And yet the idea that so many distant cultures invented almost the same tale by coincidence stretches belief. Myths may not be literal, but they may preserve fragments of memory. Fire myths carry the same weight. In Norse mythology, Ragnarok ends with flames consuming the world before it is reborn green and fertile. Among Native American peoples, stories describe earlier worlds destroyed by fire from the sky. In Hindu cosmology, each age ends in catastrophe, sometimes by water, sometimes by fire. Fire has shaped the earth through volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and wildfires. Myths of fire could be the cultural echoes of these cataclysms. Fire also serves as a universal symbol of destruction and renewal. The myths may be metaphor, not memory, and yet when we compare these myths with what geology shows us, ash layers, craters, extinction events, the parallels grow harder to ignore. Even ice finds its place in mythology. In Norse tradition, the world begins in ice and ends in ice. Hindu cosmology divides time into cycles called yugas, with each cycle ending in collapse before another begins. Ice has advanced and retreated across continents repeatedly in Earth's history. Myths of ice and eternal winter may be echoes of glaciations remembered by ancient peoples. Myths are not history. They may symbolize hardship or moral lessons rather than literal events. Yet together flood, fire and ice create a striking picture. They match the very cycles the Earth reveals in stone. Myths may not be fantasy, they may be memory encoded in story. And then there is Atlantis. We return to it not for proof, but for what it represents. Whether allegory or memory, Plato's tale of a great civilization swallowed by the sea remains a symbol of fragility. Atlantis has become shorthand for all lost worlds. Dwarka shows how legend can hold truth. Other submerged ruins suggest the same. Atlantis, real or not, is a mirror. It reminds us that even the greatest societies can vanish in a moment. Submerged ruins exist. Dwarka, Pavlopetri and others lie beneath the waves. Atlantis may represent one of many real cities lost to rising seas after the Ice Age. Atlantis may also have been Plato's invention, a parable about pride and downfall. The power of Atlantis lies not in proof, but in possibility. It keeps alive the question, what else may lie beneath the seas undiscovered? Anomalies, ruins, artifacts and myths do not prove lost civilizations. They do not rewrite history on their own. But they do open the door. They remind us that history as we know it is incomplete. They suggest that resets may not be only geological but human as well. What if Göbekli Tepe is the remnant of a forgotten world? What if the Antikythera mechanism was not an isolated invention, but a rediscovered fragment of knowledge? What if the Piri race map preserved coastlines drawn long before ours? What if myths of floods and fires are not allegories but memories? Individually, each question can be answered with caution, with rebuttal, with skepticism. Together they point towards something larger, a silence that is not empty but full of missing voices, and that is why these whispers matter. They are not answers but challenges. They challenge us to see history not as a line but as a cycle. They challenge us to accept fragility, not permanence. They challenge us to wonder whether resets have shaped humanity more often than we admit. In the end, what we have are fragments: a carved pillar, a bronze gear, a map on animal skin, a story told by firelight. None is enough to prove a lost civilization, but together they create a mood, a sense that our past is deeper, stranger, and more fragile than we know. As Act 3 draws to its climax, we're left with this feeling that whispers matter. They may be faint, but they suggest echoes of forgotten worlds, worlds that rose, that fell, that vanished into silence, worlds that may have existed long before our own. And in that silence, in those whispers, lies the possibility that history is not the whole story. It is only the latest chapter in a book that has been written and erased many times before. Whispers of lost ages do not shout. They never present themselves as clear evidence. They arrive as fragments scattered and faint, a ruin older than it should be, a map that suggests knowledge out of place, a device to advance for its time, a myth repeated across oceans. Each alone can be doubted, but together they form a chorus that refuses to be ignored. Göbekli Tepe, 12,000 years old, forces us to ask how hunter-gatherers could carve and arrange such massive stones. Perhaps they did. But if they did, then the timeline of human capability must be rewritten. The Antikythera mechanism, a computer of bronze gears, appeared 2,000 years ago and then disappeared for more than a millennium. Was it a lone invention or a fragment of deeper knowledge? The Piri race map, based on older sources, hints at coastlines that should not have been known, and myths of floods and fires told on every continent echo the same structure of destruction and renewal. All these things exist. They are not inventions. Together they may point to lost ages, civilizations erased by resets. Yet mainstream explanations exist for each. Hunter-gatherers could have been more capable than assumed. The Antikythera mechanism could have been an isolated marvel. The map could have been a composite of known coasts. Myths could be universal metaphors. Both views are valid. Both must be heard. And the tension between them is what makes these whispers powerful. They keep us questioning. They keep us looking. Perhaps that is their true gift. Not proof, but curiosity. Not certainty, but wonder. They remind us that history is not finished, that discovery is still possible, that the silence of the past may yet reveal its secrets. Dwarka shows us how myth can hold truth. For centuries it was only a story, a legend of a city of the god Krishna lost to the sea. Then divers found ruins beneath the waves. Not proof of divinity, but proof that myth can preserve memory. How many other stories might hold the same? How many other legends dismissed as fantasy might contain fragments of reality? Atlantis stands as a symbol. Whether it was allegory or memory does not matter. What matters is the possibility it represents, that a civilization, no matter how powerful, can vanish in a single day and night. That permanence is an illusion. That fragility is the rule. When we weave together ruins, maps, artifacts, and myths, we see not answers but patterns. Patterns of memory and loss. Patterns of knowledge appearing, vanishing, and appearing again. Patterns of survival and renewal. And these patterns align with what we already know from the Earth itself. The Earth has been reset many times. Life has been erased and restarted. Extinctions, ice ages, eruptions, and floods have cleared the stage again and again. If the Earth resets life, why would it not reset civilizations as well? Perhaps Göbekli Tepe is a remnant of a society that rose before the last great flood. Perhaps the Antikythera mechanism is a rediscovery of knowledge once common. Perhaps the Piri Reis map preserves a glimpse of coastlines from a world that no longer exists. Perhaps myths are the voices of survivors telling stories to keep memory alive. We cannot prove these things, but we cannot dismiss them either. They remain persistent, nagging like whispers in the dark. And so we come to the end of Act 3. We have walked among ruins that should not exist. We have examined maps that show too much. We have held devices that seem too advanced. We have listened to stories that echo across continents. They do not give us certainty. They give us questions. Questions that unsettle, that provoke, that open doors. Questions that remind us how much we do not know. What if Earth has been reset thousands of times? What if our history is only the latest chapter in a book far older than we imagine? What if civilizations have risen and fallen before us, leaving only whispers behind? As we turn to the next act, we leave the realm of anomalies and myths and return to ourselves. Because the real question is not only whether resets have shaped the past, the real question is whether resets will shape our future. The Earth has burned, frozen, flooded, and erupted. It has reset life again and again. We are not outside this cycle. We are part of it. And our civilization, global and vast though it may be, is no less fragile than those that came before. In Act 4, we will confront this fragility directly. We will see how sudden leaps in culture may not be beginnings but recoveries. We will explore how knowledge survives collapse and how memory fades. And we will ask the hardest question of all. If the Earth resets again, what will remain of us? The cycle and us. We have listened to the whispers of lost ages, to ruins, artifacts, and myths that suggest resets may have shaped our past. But now we must turn the lens back on ourselves. Because the question is not only whether resets happened before, the question is whether we too live inside the same cycle, fragile as those who came before. One of the great puzzles of human history is the sudden leaps. For tens of thousands of years, stone tools remained simple. Then around 40,000 years ago, something changed. Cave walls exploded with art. Figurines were carved. Musical instruments appeared. Hunting tools became more advanced. Archaeologists call it the creative explosion. The evidence is clear. Cave paintings in France and Spain, bone flutes in Germany, carved figurines across Europe, all dating to the same narrow window in time. Humanity, after long silence, seemed to leap forward almost overnight. Why then? Why, after so many thousands of years of apparent stillness, did culture and creativity bloom? Some scientists suggest the rise of symbolic thought or language. Others point to genetic changes in the brain. But another possibility is worth considering. Perhaps it was not the first leap but the recovery after a reset. Perhaps culture had flourished before, and the creative explosion was not invention, but rediscovery. The same pattern appears again 10,000 years ago. In multiple parts of the world at roughly the same time agriculture emerged. In the Middle East, in China, in the Americas, in Africa, People began to domesticate plants and animals to settle to build. Archaeological evidence confirms the timing. Agriculture appeared independently in separate regions within a few thousand years of one another. Could this simultaneous shift have been fragments of memory resurfacing? Techniques preserved orally or through myth reawakened when the climate stabilized after the Ice Age. Many scholars argue that environmental stability alone explains it. Warmer, wetter conditions allowed farming to succeed. No lost civilization is required, yet the suddenness is striking. It looks less like invention, more like recollection, like survivors remembering how to plant, how to store, how to rebuild. These leaps challenge the idea of steady progress. They suggest that human culture may have advanced, collapsed, and advanced again, that we live not on a straight line but on a staircase of rises and falls. And if that is true, then we must face the fragility of memory. Because knowledge is not permanent. It survives only when societies are stable enough to preserve it. When stability fails, knowledge burns. The Library of Alexandria is the most famous example. In the ancient world, it was said to hold hundreds of thousands of scrolls, the wisdom of Greece, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and beyond. Over centuries it was damaged, looted, and burned. By the end, almost all of its knowledge was gone. 90% of what had been collected was lost forever. The destruction of the library is real. Ancient sources record its repeated burning. If one fire can erase so much, imagine a reset on a global scale. Imagine every library gone, every archive destroyed, every digital file lost. The silence that would follow would be far deeper than the one we already face in prehistory. We cannot know what was lost. Perhaps it was mostly mundane records, not secret knowledge. But even if it was mundane, it is gone. Permanence is an illusion. Picture a book set alight. Pages curl, ink fades, words become smoke. Knowledge vanishes in moments. That is how fragile memory is. If our world collapsed tomorrow, how much would remain 1,000 years from now? How much would be lost forever? This fragility sets the stage for the debate we now face: science versus speculation. Mainstream science holds firmly to the timeline we know: 6,000 years of recorded civilization, fragmentary evidence for what came before, no confirmed proof of lost worlds. It is a cautious view rooted in the demand for evidence that can be measured, dated, and tested. The alternative view argues that resets explain the anomalies, that ruins like Göbekli Tepe devices like the Antikythera mechanism maps like Piri Reis and myths of floods are not isolated curiosities but pieces of a bigger picture. That history is incomplete because resets have erased most of it. Both views deserve to be heard. One warns us not to leap beyond the evidence. The other warns us not to ignore the whispers. Together they form a balance. The debate itself is what keeps us honest, what keeps us searching. But as the debate continues, one truth remains beyond dispute. The Earth has reset life before. Extinctions, ice ages, floods, and eruptions are facts, not theories. If resets have happened, they will happen again. The question is not if, but when. And this brings us to the present, to the warning for the future. Today, we face our own risks. Climate change threatens to redraw coastlines within centuries. Asteroids rare but inevitable still circle the Sun, any one of which could end our world as suddenly as Chicxulub ended the dinosaurs. Beneath the ground, supervolcanoes like Yellowstone wait capable of eruptions that would dim the sky for years. These threats are real. Science acknowledges them. If they strike our world, could become the next Atlantis. Some argue that our technology gives us protection, that we can track asteroids, prepare for climate change, adapt to eruptions. Perhaps. But history suggests that fragility always wins in the end. Our civilization feels eternal, but so did Rome. Our cities feel permanent, but so did the Mayas. We believe we are secure, but so did the Indus Valley. And all of them vanished into silence. The cycle continues. Old worlds end. New ones begin. The only question is when our chapter will close, and what fragments, if any, will remain for those who come after. The cycle and us. To understand our place in this rhythm of rise and fall, we must face the fragility of memory itself. Because even if people survive, a reset knowledge rarely does. Imagine the Library of Alexandria. In the ancient world, it was said to hold the greatest collection of texts ever assembled. Hundreds of thousands of scrolls filled with history, science, philosophy, and stories from across the known world. For centuries, travellers spoke of its shelves as a treasury of human thought. Then came fire, not once but multiple times. Wars, accidents, neglect. By the end, most of the scrolls were gone. 90% of what had been gathered vanished into smoke. The library's destruction is well documented, though spread across centuries. If one library can lose so much, imagine a global reset. Imagine every archive, every library, every digital server destroyed. In a single catastrophe, nearly all of human knowledge could disappear. Some historians argue the contents may not have been as extraordinary as legend claims. Perhaps many scrolls were mundane records, not secret wisdom. But even if they were mundane, they are still lost, and the loss is irreversible. Now picture a modern parallel. Our age stores its knowledge not in scrolls, but in digital form. Billions of documents and images stored on servers that depend on electricity, on fragile machines, on a network that must be constantly maintained. If that network were broken, if power grids failed, what would remain? Within a generation, most of our accumulated knowledge could be inaccessible. Within centuries, it could be gone. Visualize this as pages curling in fire, letters rising as smoke, an ocean of words dissolved in a moment. Knowledge feels permanent, but it is not. It is as fragile as the paper it is written on, as fragile as the circuits that carry it. This fragility shapes the debate that follows: science versus speculation. On one side, mainstream science insists on caution. It builds its narrative on evidence that can be measured and tested. According to this view, civilization began 6,000 years ago, and everything earlier was simpler, smaller, and less organized. The anomalies we find, whether Göbekli Tepe or strange maps or artifacts out of place, can be explained within that framework. To leap beyond the evidence is to risk fantasy. On the other side, the alternative view argues that these anomalies make more sense if we accept resets, that Göbekli Tepe looks like a survivor from a lost age, that the Antikythera mechanism suggests cycles of knowledge rediscovered, that myths of floods and fires are not coincidence but memory. According to this view, history feels incomplete because it is incomplete. Resets erased more than we know. Both sides speak with conviction, and both have a point. The mainstream warns us not to mistake whispers for proof. The alternative warns us not to dismiss whispers as coincidence. Between them lies the truth that our story is still unfinished, and that silence does not equal nothing. This balance is essential, because without skepticism we would fall into fantasy. Without imagination we would ignore the unknown. It is the debate itself that keeps us honest. But while scholars debate, the Earth continues its rhythm. Extinctions, ice ages, floods, and eruptions have reset life before, and they will reset life again. The question is not whether, but when. Which brings us to the warning for the future. Look around our modern world. Cities sprawl across continents. Lights glow from space. Our reach stretches beyond the Earth. It feels eternal. It feels unshakable. Yet permanence has never been part of the human story. Climate change threatens to redraw coastlines within centuries. Glaciers melt. Seas rise. Storms grow stronger. If waters climb high enough, cities like New York, London, Shanghai, Mumbai, and Tokyo will vanish just as surely as Dwarka and Pavlopetri did. Asteroids still orbit the sun. Most are small, but some are large enough to end civilization. Chicxulub proved what one strike can do. Dinosaurs ruled for more than 100 million years, yet they vanished in a single moment of fire. Why would we be immune? Beneath the ground, supervolcanoes wait. Yellowstone, Toba, and others. Their eruptions are rare, but when they come, they can darken skies for years. The last time Toba erupted, it nearly erased humanity itself. All of these threats are real. Climate change, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions are not speculation. They are part of Earth's history. If they strike again, we could become the next Atlantis, the next lost world remembered only as myth. Some argue our technology makes us safer. We can track asteroids, monitor volcanoes, adapt to changing climates. Perhaps this time we will endure. But history suggests that no civilization is immune forever. The Maya thought their world eternal. The Indus believed theirs would last. Rome called itself the Eternal City. Each was wrong. We are no different. We too live on fragile ground. The cycle of history warns us. Civilizations rise. They flourish. They fall. The earth resets. Survivors rebuild. The story begins again. And so we must ask, if reset comes again, what will remain of us? What fragments will survive the silence? Will our skyscrapers, our satellites, our networks endure? Or will they crumble, corrode, and vanish, leaving only whispers for those who come after? The cycle of humanity. When we step back and see the long arc of history, it is not a line, but a rhythm. Civilizations rise, they flourish, they collapse, and then after silence, new ones begin. The earth resets and the story is written again. Think of the sudden leaps. The creative explosion 40,000 years ago when art, music, and imagination seemed to appear out of nowhere. The rise of agriculture 10,000 years ago, not in one place, but in many almost at the same time. These are moments that look like beginnings. But perhaps they were not beginnings at all. Perhaps they were recoveries, rediscoveries, fragments of memory rising again after resets. History may be less a tale of invention than of remembrance. Survivors of collapse pass down fragment stories or simple practices. Generations later, those fragments spark leaps forward. To us it looks like sudden genius. In reality, it may be echoes of forgotten ages, but echoes fade. Memory is fragile. Knowledge is easily lost. The Library of Alexandria proved that. Centuries of thought and discovery vanished in flames. And that was just one building in one city. Imagine if the whole world burned. Imagine if every archive, every library, every server farm were destroyed. What would remain? Almost nothing. Within a generation, stories would replace knowledge. Within centuries, myths would be all that survived. This is why resets matter. They're not only about destruction, they're about forgetting. They're about how quickly memory can vanish. And so we find ourselves at the heart of the debate. Science or speculation? Which story do we trust? Mainstream science insists on evidence. Civilization, it says, began 6,000 years ago. Before that, people lived simply in small groups with no great societies. That story is cautious, conservative, and built on what we can measure, but the anomalies remain. Gobekli Tepe Puma Punku, the Antikythera mechanism, the Piri Reis map, myths of floods and fires. They do not fit easily into the neat narrative, and so the alternative view says resets explain them. Civilizations have risen before, their traces were erased. What we see now are fragments of cycles, not a single climb. Which view is correct? Perhaps both, perhaps neither. Perhaps the truth is somewhere in between. That is why the debate matters. It keeps us from certainty. It keeps us searching. But while we debate, the earth continues to turn. Its cycles do not wait for us. Climate change is real. Seas are rising again. The storms grow stronger. The glaciers retreat. And coastlines are already shifting. Asteroids still move silently through space. Yellowstone and other supervolcanoes still rumble far beneath our feet. These are not myths. They are facts. And they remind us that reset is not a story of the past alone. It is a possibility for our future. We live in an age of extraordinary achievement. We build towers higher than ever before. We explore beyond the Earth. We create networks that bind the planet together. It feels eternal. It feels unshakable. Yet so did Rome. So did the Maya. So did the Indus Valley. Each thought its story permanent. Each was wrong. What if we are wrong too? What if our permanence is just another illusion? What if we are living in the fragile pause between resets? Imagine the future. Seas rise by 100 meters, drowning every coastal city. An asteroid falls, darkening the sky for years. A supervolcano erupts, covering continents in ash. Imagine what our world would look like after such a reset. Empty towers, broken roads, corroded machines. Within centuries, the jungle, the desert, and the sea would take them all back. Within millennia, almost nothing would remain. And then one day, survivors might begin again. They would tell stories of great cities, of lights in the sky, of machines that spoke across oceans. Their children would pass those stories down. Centuries later, someone would carve symbols on stone, or light a fire in a temple, or build a pyramid to the heavens. Archaeologists of the future would look back and see a sudden leap, and they would ask, how did this happen? The cycle would continue. This is both sobering and strangely comforting. Sobering because it reminds us that nothing we build will last forever. Comforting because it reminds us that collapse is not the end. Resets bring destruction, but they also bring renewal. Each time the Earth erases, life writes again. Each time humanity falls, survivors rise. The question then is not whether the cycle will continue. It will. The question is what role we will play. Will we leave behind nothing but silence? Or will we leave behind something more, something for the next chapter to find? And so we come to the final reflection. The Earth is like a book with many chapters. We are reading the latest, but not the only one. Resets are the turning of pages. They are both endings and beginnings. They destroy, but they also renew. If Earth has been reset thousands of times, then we are only one attempt among many. Our knowledge feels vast, but in deep time it is a flicker. Our monuments feel eternal, but they are temporary. Our story feels unique, but it may not be. The cycle of humanity is the cycle of the Earth. Fragile, resilient, temporary, enduring, all at once. So we close with a question. If one day the Earth resets again, if our chapter comes to its end, what will we leave behind? What whispers will survive the silence? And what will those who come after think of us?